The African-American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, music, and religion. We'll explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they'd been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Arthur Barnes, Chairman of the Board of the National Jazz Museum in our Harlem. Glad to have you with us today, Arthur.
Great to be here, Roscoe.
Now, tell us about how you got involved in the National Jazz Museum in Harlem.
Well, when I was Senior Vice President at Hip Health Plan of New York, I was in charge of our philanthropic support of nonprofit organizations. And through that, with a name like HIP for the company, it was a natural for me to segue into us supporting jazz projects. And that's how it got me into the field, and one of those projects was the National Jazz Museum. After I retired, I joined the board, became chairman, and the rest is history, as they say.
Well, now, the Jazz Museum is an idea. It's a national idea to celebrate what African Americans have done in jazz, and others for that matter. At the same time, you have groups like Lincoln Center of the Performing Arts with Wynton Marsalis that are supposedly promoting jazz. How do you differentiate yourself from the Lincoln Center Project and the National Jazz Museum?
Well, let me just say to you that it's not they say that they promote jazz. Lincoln Center, under the direction of Wynton Marsalis, has made the greatest impact in this music in 50 years. And so the establishment at Jazz at Lincoln Center was a tremendous milestone that was accomplished. They are not a museum. They are a performance entity, an educational entity. And the difference with the museum is the fact that we promote, we protect, we curate exhibitions in jazz that we think the public will like. We also are in a position to take the temperature of the market that we serve to see what it is that they want. And the third objective that we have is to be able to, as important as the past is, and people usually who are affiliated with jazz talk about the past, we know that it's important to know where you came from, to know your roots. But we also know that this is a music that's in transition. It always was, it always will be. And we're looking forward as much as we are looking backward.
That's interesting, because as you were talking, I was thinking about the origin of jazz and how it mutated with some of the white performers and then some of the black performers, and now it's mutated again, more electronic music, more rap music.
That's correct.
As you develop your museum, are you going to have separate sections devoted to each one of those
No,
areas?
we can't. Unfortunately, space would not allow for that. But what we will do, of course, is to have exhibits that will change. We will have exhibits that reflect the changing times of jazz itself, its growth, its development, its influence on our youth culture. All of those elements are worthy of study and examination, and we will do that.
Now, you're located on 126th Street in Harlem.
That's correct.
And how large is your building, and are you going to expand and those kind of things?
Well, we're going to build a new facility on 125th Street, directly across the street from the Apollo Theater.
Couldn't be better.
It certainly couldn't. And we're in the process now of raising money to make that idea and dream a reality.
Now, in terms of raising money, I imagine the National Endowment for the Arts and the Humanities is going to give you some money, the New York State Council, and I imagine a lot of private support organizations.
That's correct. That's the way you raise money for institutions like this. You're perfectly right. More important, or let me put it this way, just as important as those sources of revenue are individuals who become turned on by the concept of a National Museum of Jazz located in Harlem, and that they would be involved with the museum to the extent that they would take advantage of some naming opportunities that we're going to make available to them.
Now, if someone who's watching the show decides, I'm excited about this, I want to make a contribution, how do they get in touch with you?
They can go up on our website, or they can be in touch with us at 204 East 126th Street, New York, New York, 135. And I believe that the website itself will introduce them to our programs, to our goals, and our objectives.
Yeah, I've been on the website. It's a very impressive website. Lets you feel jazz.
And you can hear it, too.
You really
yes.
feel it.
Yes.
And I think it's important that Harlem has such a great role. You think of New Orleans, you think of Kansas City,
yes.
and you think of Harlem. When you think of the roots
and Chicago.
Of jazz. And Chicago.
Yes, Roscoe, that's a very good point. Now, while Harlem is not the birthplace of jazz, it certainly was the incubator for the music, because it provided the richest market for the music and for musicians, and that's why they gravitated to New York City and to Harlem in particular. That is our great contribution. The very fact that disparate members of our black society coming from all over this United States to gravitate to this one community and here make their living and their reputation and, of course, their artistic contribution. So we have a rich history here in Harlem that we're going to capitalize on, and certainly the night spots that spawned great enthusiasm for the music, Minton's Playhouse, Small's Paradise, the Cotton Club itself, and so many others, Count Basie's Club, so many others that contributed to the culture and art of our great city of New York.
And don't forget the Savoy Ballroom.
I was just about to say the Savoy Ballroom made such a contribution to the big band swing era of this music. That's right.
Well, one of the things that I observe is that many people who admire jazz don't totally understand how it came out of discrimination and segregation. As a matter of fact, right now, many of our young black people don't understand where jazz came from. How do you account for that?
I don't account for it at all. Jazz music is a reflection of the experience of the people that created it. It is that expression took its form from gospel, from the religious experience, from the oppression that slaves underwent, and from the other life's experiences that influenced the character and who these people were. And, Roscoe, one of the most important aspects in that character is the will to survive. We are a survival people.
And when I think of jazz, I think about the New Orleans funerals.
Yes, that's
the
right.
Musical film.
That's correct.
They're drumming them out. They're celebrating and
That's
so
correct.
on. And I also think about Louis Armstrong. I don't think we necessarily have a father or mother of jazz, but Louis Armstrong has been so prototypic in terms of the New Orleans experience,
That's right.
his singing, his trumpet playing, and his general excitement.
Yes.
Many people thought that Louis Armstrong was not progressive enough. But on the other hand, he was very progressive given the time he was working in.
Well, no question about that. And he was outspoken, and I draw your attention to the controversy in, was it where Governor Forbes was governor and kept black children out of the schools, and the president, which was Dwight Eisenhower, call for the National Guard to come in and allow those children to get an education. And Louis Armstrong attacked General Eisenhower, who was then our president, for not acting soon enough to prevent those children to have that negative exposure. So yes, in his own way, but you're perfectly right. He was a product of his environment and of his time.
Now, let's talk about Kansas City. Some people say
Yeah.
Kansas City was the place where jazz really took form.
Well,
what do you
happened
think about that?
in Kansas City is noted for the Blue Devils, which was a territorial band. In those days, in the early 30s, you had territorial bands that would tour in a particular region, and they would develop a reputation. Kansas City became very, very profitable for Count Basie because it was there that he started his first band. In fact, he didn't start it, he inherited a band that in which he played the piano. And when the leader quit, the band members implored him to take over the band, and reluctantly he did. And what a band leader he was. So Kansas City was the birthplace of the first Count Basie bands, which was known as the swingin'est band in the land.
Now, it's very interesting. We talked about Louis Armstrong and Count Basie.
Yeah.
Both of them ended up in New York.
They all end up
Living in New York. Louis Armstrong lived in Corona,
That's
and Count Basie lived in St. Albans.
Yes.
And of course, there are just so many other jazz musicians
Illinois
who've been here.
Jacquette.
Many of them, like Dizzy, went to
New Jersey.
New Jersey.
But he was in Long Island first. He was
Yeah,
in
that's
Queens
right.
first, St. Albans.
So as you select the topics, do you select around instruments, do you select around eras, or do you select around fame?
All of the above.
Okay, tell me.
All of the above. We have a curatorial committee of the board of directors that reviews all of our programmatic efforts. And the curatorial experience is not limited to just board members. There are outside curators of great renown that we're going to call upon to curate exhibits for us, permanent and transient. And so how we make the selection is usually up to the artistic director. And
So-
he, together with that committee, come to an agreement on what they want to produce for a particular year. And right now, Roscoe, we are planning our program for the next 3 to 5 years.
Excellent.
As we speak.
So what's the program going to be for next year?
You'll
You
have
know
to
I was
wait
gonna
and
ask that.
see. You'll have to wait and see. But by next year, we hope to have our groundbreaking in 2012. And from there, go right on into construction and be finished with the building somewhere in the beginning of 2014,
Now,
the next 3 years.
on 126th Street, folks can still come in and see some.
We have
of the
we have our visitor center there. Yes, of course. We have our visitor center. They can come and they can have the jazz experience. They can.
Can they dance?
No, that's the only thing they can't do. But you know, it's interesting that you raise that because you know jazz music was primarily dance music, and we don't identify it with dancing anymore because we particularly don't do social dancing the way it was done when you and I came up in Harlem to have jazz music on our neighborhood jukeboxes. That was our popular music of the times, and those dances that went with that music became the competitive spirit, kindled the competitive spirit between neighborhoods that would compete for the best dances.
One of the prototypic things was going to the Savoy Ballroom and see who could outdo whom.
That's exactly
and
right.
I was telling somebody when you
That's
went there,
correct.
the floor would actually ripple
Would
because
shake,
people
yes.
were jumping up and down and
Yes.
so on. But now we have rap music and people sort of bounce up and down but don't move and don't
Well,
dance
they move,
with each other.
they move, but it's a different rhythm.
Now, I understand that you are getting a collection called the Savoy Collection of an engineer who recorded many, many jazz bands and jazz concerts and so on. How
The
is that?
Savory Collection.
The Savory.
William Savory was his name.
How is that coming along?
Well, that's coming along very, very well. We are fundraising for that too, because to save the Savory Collection, they have to be rehabilitated and re-recorded to digital, and some of the recordings have been damaged over the years, and so it's quite a project. There are 1,000 records, and in various conditions, but with some music and combinations of musicians that has never been heard. These have never been published. These were radio broadcasts that he made for himself, kept them, and would not allow anyone to listen to them. Everybody knew that he had them because he had a great reputation as an innovative audio engineer, but nobody would be allowed to hear it. We, through our executive director, Lauren Schoenberg, reached out to the son and heir of Bill Savory, and after communicating with him for many years, the son finally agreed to part with the collection, and we purchased it from him. That's how we got it.
That's a fantastic opportunity for people to understand the way music used to be. Many of us, you and me both, had record collections.
That's correct.
But then when the electronic stuff came, the records were scratchy. We either lost them or gave them away, and that's gone.
And the quality was not as good.
And the quality,
That's
clearly,
no
quality is
question
not
about
as
it.
good.
Yeah.
But and now we have videos of large bands, and some of the videos go back almost 50 years.
That's correct.
So there's a lot there that can be brought into the museum. Now, what about bands? Are you going to talk about bands like
Sure.
Faye Terrell and no, he was with Andy Kirk and Jimmy Lunsford?
No question about it. But you see, there again, we're talking about the past. Let's talk about the past vis-a-vis jazz in Harlem.
Good.
Where the Renaissance Casino had great band leaders. Andy Kirk is Clouds of Joy. They were the house band at the Renaissance. They were followed by Vernon Andrades, who was a terrifically popular band leader for dancers. And then, of course, Fats Green and his Calypso Orchestra played many years at the Renaissance Casino. And that's where they had the basketball games.
That's where the Harlem Renaissance, New York
Harlem Renaissance played. And the bands that were playing for dancing after the game were those bands that I've outlined to you.
You sound like you were there.
I was there. My father took me from the time that I was 10 years old, and I would go to those basketball games, and the band would play in the intermission, and of course, when I was going home from the game. So yes, I experienced that, and that was Harlem at its best.
Now, one of the things I think you probably are doing is interviewing people who went to some of these concerts and dance halls to get their experiences, just like you are giving us your experiences now.
Yes, we have a featured program at the museum, Jazz for Curious Listeners, and also Harlem Speaks. The Harlem Speaks program is the one you're referring to, and we interview individuals who have had jazz music experiences, whether they're recent or whether they're ancient. But the value of the musical experience vis-a-vis this community is so vitally important, and those stories need to be told.
Now, you do get some support from the Empowerment Zone, Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone?
Yes,
because they have an initiative to deal with black culture, or culture in Harlem.
That's correct.
They do Jazzmobile, and they do Aaron Davis Hall, and they do...
That's right. And the National Jazz Museum.
National Jazz Museum.
That's right. Yes.
Now let's talk about today and tomorrow. What do you see in today's jazz music and jazz scene that is going to carry through the next 10, 20, 30 years?
Well, that's always difficult to predict, and I wouldn't attempt to do that. While I am a fan of the music, I'm not a musician, but I've got good taste when it comes to jazz music, and I have been exercising that critical nature for many, many years. And I would say that I think the music has never been in better hands. I think that the young people today that are turning to music as a career path have made tremendous contributions to the music itself and to our society. Let me give you an example. Every one of the music schools in New York City, whether it's the Manhattan School of Music, whether it's the Jazz and Contemporary Music program at the New School, every one of those schools, including Columbia's jazz program, are oversubscribed, and there's a waiting list. There are young people, men and women, that are coming out of what we would used to consider obscure places, small countries in Europe, small places in Asia, who became exposed to the music and formed a commitment to it, so much so that they traveled to the United States to make it a career choice. So I think that we're in great shape. All of these young people that go into this music, it's become so complex and sophisticated now. No longer can a musician try to wing it.
Yeah.
You've got to know how to read the music and the complicated arrangements. And so they're of a high musical caliber. That's the point I want to make.
Now, don't you think that Duke Ellington was sort of the leader in getting the sophistication into the music and getting the various styles? Because Duke Ellington had so many different styles.
Yes, he did. Duke Ellington was one of the fathers of this music. Duke Ellington was one of this country's greatest composers. His instrument was his orchestra, which he ran for over 50 years. So yes, his influence, the style that you talk about, the class as it has been characterized, was uniquely his. And that sense of taste and good judgment permeates all of his works, which is a tremendous contribution to the world's culture.
And then, of course, Dr. Billy Taylor, who recently passed away.
Oh, yes.
Through his work on television and on radio and his concerts, helped people to understand the nuance and the history of jazz.
No question about it. Well, Dr. Taylor was a member of our board of directors, and it was a great loss when we lost him, and the world lost him. His great contributions, of course, aside from being a master musician, was that he was an educator on various levels, as you so well point out, whether it was on the college level in the conservancy, or whether it was teaching through his CBS Sunday morning broadcast, which was a must for so many of us, because his timely comments about the music and about its future was very, very important to our thinking, and he touched all of us.
I understand that some of the families of some of the late, great jazz musicians want to donate their music to the museum. What they call the book.
They have
they've written.
They have.
Who have donated thus far?
We have Benny Carter's works. We have Benny Goodman's, a lot of Benny Goodman's artifacts. We have, and it's ironic that we have a storage space that's almost as big as our current space that includes collections from just those people that you're talking about, the families of these great icons of this music, wanting to know where they can send these artifacts and memorabilia, and they have taken advantage of that opportunity with us. And so we have made great strides in adding to our collection, and it's those collections that will form the exhibits in our new facility. So we're stockpiling as much of that as we possibly can. One example of that, Roscoe, is the fact that the family of Dick Katz, the great pianist, jazz pianist, donated his Steinway piano to us, and it is in our visitors center right now.
That was really
They wanted to give it to some place that would use it, and it would spread the music.
Now, if anybody is listening,
Yes.
and I'm sure a lot of people are listening and watching, and they want to make a donation, who do they contact? You?
No, you you contact Lauren Schoenberg at National Jazz Museum in Harlem, 104 East 126th Street, New York 135, at 348-8300.
That's great. Well, one of the things that you've done with your leadership is to bring this concept alive. And I know as a result of your efforts and the many people that the National Jazz Museum in Harlem is going to thrive for many, many years. Thanks to Arthur Barnes, Chair of the Board of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem, for being with us today on African American Legends.
Thank you, Roscoe. Pleasure being here.